Hello, this is Kyle, also known as Alien Dude. Today, doing a live stream video for you. I would normally have a review out today, but last weekend was Combat Con, and frankly, I just didn't have enough time to get a good review put together. So I figure let's go ahead and do a live stream. We'll talk about Combat Con, some new acquisitions I've gotten in the past week, as well as showcase some daggers that my friend Nate, aka the Levin Lance, has sent to me to showcase, take a look at, give him my thoughts on, that kind of thing. There's 6 of those daggers. So spaced throughout this live stream, I'm going to go ahead and pick one up, show it a little, talk about it a little, that kind of thing. Since this is normally a review day, in 2 weeks, we'll be back to the normal review schedule. I will have my review of the Todd Cutler German War Sword going up in 2 weeks. I'm really excited to get that review put together. I think it's going to be a really interesting one to talk about and also hopefully get your thoughts on it. So throughout this live stream, feel free to place comments, ask questions, anything like that. I can't guarantee I'll get to all of them, but I will try to answer as many questions as possible. I see here that my friend Matthew Cross is in the chat. Might be the only one. I don't know yet. So let's take a look first at one of the daggers that the Levin Lance sent. Since there's 6 of them, I need to do them fairly often. All right, so this dagger is one made by Brian Kurse. There's 3 made by Brian Kurse and 3 made by Gulzar Ahmed. The 3 made by Brian are relatively similar, especially in geometry, and somewhat different in hilt construction. The first thing that I'll say about this is it is light, especially the wooden hilt here. It is a very light dagger. It's pretty beefy in the blade, but it doesn't feel heavy, and it locks into the hand really nicely. This is most definitely a stabbing weapon. I wouldn't really want to do much cutting at all with it. I like the hilt. The design, I believe this is intended to be a heart. It's kind of heart-like, maybe not quite fully heart-shaped, but close enough. And the small guard is bronze. The scabbard is this really nice, like kind of maroon color that you probably would call it oxblood, honestly. And it has a really nice depth to the color. The fit is a little bit loose. A loose fit is, in my opinion, better than a tight fit because, especially where I live, scabbards seize up all the time. So I tend to like them a little bit looser. So, but this one is probably, normally it falls right out, but it's got a tiny bit of retention here. So that was the first of the daggers. Like I said, we'll go through a bunch of them throughout the live stream and just talk about them. I want to say thank you to Nate for sending them over my way. They're a lot of fun to check out his designs and his ideas. He is constantly coming up with new stuff and having new stuff made. And it's really cool to see because he has a very unique aesthetic and sense of style. And that really comes through on the majority of his designs. So let's talk about Combat Con, the reason I'm not doing a review today. This was the 15th Combat Con, I think it was, and also, sadly, the last Combat Con. The show, or the runners of it, I believe they were hoping to find somebody who would buy the IP and continue the con after they were done with it. But I don't think they had any takers on that, and I can't really blame people. I wouldn't want to try to take over a massive con like that. Combat Con is probably at this point the 2nd largest HEMA con in North America. I don't know that for sure. Certainly the 2nd largest on the West Coast, with SoCal Swordfight having recently vastly overtaken it. So I wouldn't want to take over a con like that if I were going to run a con, which I don't really have any interest in doing so. But if I were going to, I would want to start small and let it grow naturally. So sadly, Combat Con is done. This was the last one. I've been going to Combat Con for 5 years, if I remember right. I believe 2021 was my first one, and it was the first HEMA or sword con that I went to. So it has always had a special place in my heart, even though it was in Vegas. Not a huge fan of Vegas. It was in the Flamingo Hotel. Really not a fan of the Flamingo Hotel, but it was still a really great con. You had really good vendors who would come out. You'd have Albion, Sterling Armory. I believe Angus Trim and Arms and Armor have been there before. They were not there at any of the ones that I attended. The last few Valiant Armory has been at, and you'd have people coming from all over the country and probably the world to compete in a wide variety of HEMA tournaments. I think they had more actual fencing tournaments than SoCal Sword Fight. I could be wrong. That's kind of a distant second for me for the interest in Combat Con or any of these cons. I'm there for the sharps. I'm there for the cutting tournaments. And then the fencing is kind of a secondary thing and a distant second thing. Now, the other thing that Combat Con had that I'm not aware of, neither ones that I go to had, was also the Saber League, the Saber Legion, something like that. They had an entire section for lightsaber fencing. I never really checked it out, but that's kind of cool. So I'm sad that Combat Con is over. It was a great experience every year. The people running it were always great. The vendors were great. The community was great. It's going to be sorely missed. So, like I said, I'm there for the cutting, the sharp swords, that kind of thing. So, in the last 2 years, I believe I've competed at Combat Con twice, and I figure this will be a good opportunity to go over my cutting footage so you can see how I did. Spoiler alert, I did well, but not as well as I wanted to. So let me see if I can bring up the program to showcase it. And I'm going to apologize before I even get started because the quality on some of these is not great. All right. So this is the first round, and this is going to be the worst quality video. This was the best angle. Thank you to Chris Fields for providing this video. Unfortunately, it was provided through Facebook, and Facebook Messenger does awful things to video quality. So this is a pretty terrible quality video, but I think you can see it well enough. I do have some other angles, and they're certainly much better quality, but you can't really see the cutting as well. So while I'm doing that, I want to move windows around a little bit. And before we get started, let's see. Hello, Alexis B. Blindly Sama, hello again. Yes, he has amazing designs. Pens and pen blades, good to see you. And Andy, I wanted to check out the lightsaber stuff, but it's just like the classes that they have at Combat Con. Every year, I would look through the classes and be like, okay, I want to check this class out, and I want to check this class out. And they're at specific times. And every single time I picked one out, I would get wrapped up in talking to sword friends or browsing the vendors, that kind of thing, and I would completely miss the class. Same thing with a lot of the lightsaber dueling. I never did see any of it because I always would get wrapped up in the sharps, which is definitely my greatest area of interest. So this cutting is the first round of open cutting. Open cutting is Combat Con's version of beginner. It doesn't really fit into beginner. There's basically open cutting and advanced cutting. Generally speaking, you do advanced if you have won a big tournament, open cutting tournament before, or if you really consistently medal in them, even if you haven't gold medaled. I have not medaled yet, but I'm hoping to get there soon. So this is the first round. This is the 6 basic cuts. That's 2 Oberhaus or descending cuts, 1 from each side, 2 Unterhaus, which is ascending cuts from each side, and then 2 Mittelhaus, 1 from each side, and that's horizontal cuts. I use the German terminology for that because it's what I'm most familiar with. So there's a little bit of strategy here. You can choose the order you do the cuts in. And the little bit of strategy is generally around mat conservation. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But here is my first cut, the most basic cut, overhalf from the right. And that was a good cut. Piece flew a little bit farther than I would have liked. Let's look at that again. Yeah, the piece flew a little bit farther, I would like, but at Combat Con, this is a tournament that Philip Martin runs, and he is not nearly as vicious on scoring where the mat falls as they were at SoCal Sword Fight. That was a good cut. And I probably should bring up the scoring for each of these cuts. Don't think I'll be able to show it on screen because that's going to be too much stuff on screen, but I can at least talk about it. All right, round scores. All right, so I got 20 points for that. That's full points. Each cut is worth 10 points. You have 10 points for the quality of the cut, how straight the cut is, where the piece falls, that kind of thing. And then there's 10 points for your form during it. So if you have if you're off balance or you chamber the sword or things like that, you'll get deductions on form, and you can get deductions on the cut as well. So that was a full 20 points. So here's where we talk about some strategy. I'm indicating I'm going to do a left Unterhau. A lot of people will do the 2 Oberhaus and then the 2 Unterhaus and then the 2 middle house. That is what I used to do. But when I can, I prefer to do an Oberhau followed by the opposite side Unterhau because it's taking off the least amount of mat. And the less mat you can take off, the more you have for your later cuts, which makes things a lot easier. And it's also really good for practicing your targeting because in the next round, semaphores, you really want to be as conservative as you can while still succeeding at your cuts. So, let me see. Hello, Dan, if I believe that's your name, if I'm remembering right. That is Dan who won open cutting and did it amazingly, by the way. He's saying that's a great strategy unless you forget to do a cut. Yes, that is a possibility. Generally, at least from what I've seen in open cutting, they'll tell you what cuts you have left. They won't. Actually, I'm not sure on that. Don't quote me on that. And yes, so they do rate what the rules for Combat Con stated was if it falls more than 4 feet away from the stand, there's a deduction. At SoCal Sword Fight, they had a circle around the stand and then another circle around it, and it was scored based on how close in those circles it was, and it was very tight scoring. The idea here is that it's judging the quality of the cut. Ideally, when you cut, the piece is still standing. That's pretty rare, although somebody did do it at Combat Con this year. But the idea is the cleaner the cut, the less the tatami falls. All right, so the next one is my left Unter. And that was probably one of my best cuts this entire time. I was a little greedy on it. I took a little bit more off than I would have liked. So you can see I took off, that looks like around 6 inches or so. This is really pretty rough estimate, but I ideally would have started the cut right around that rubber band rather than several inches below it. It's not a huge deal when you're only doing 6 cuts on a mat. You can afford to be a little more greedy. But when you're looking at, like I said, semaphores where you have to get, you can get up to 8 cuts on a mat, you really want to be conservative. So this was a little greedy, but not terrible. And the mat dropped very nicely there. And I don't, when I'm signaling the cut, I don't speak, I just indicate it because I don't want confusion. I don't want to maybe they don't hear me, anything like that. It's just like, I'll just signal the cut. I could also say it. I choose to just signal it. So here, it was a good cut, but I did mountain it. And you can see here, I cut into the previous cut a little bit, which is a small deduction. Before I go further on this cut, though, the previous one, I got, let's see. Let me go ahead and show this cut again, because I didn't talk about the scoring on this. So I did get a deduction on this. They docked me 4 points total, which I was a little surprised about, to be honest. I'm not sure what it is. I might have a bit of an over rotation there of the shoulder. I'm not presenting my back, but my shoulder is kind of over rotated a little bit. They have the deductions listed, but I confirmed when they were doing this that they are just kind of using placeholder deductions of what they actually were. So not to actually read into it. It says scallop for the cut quality and chambering for the cut, which is drawing the sword back too far to aid in the power. I don't think I really did either of those during this cut. We can look again. I wouldn't consider that chambering. Russell, the judge of the form, might. I don't know. I don't think there was a scallop either there. I think that was probably, yeah. I'm not going to read too much into it. It was a good cut. I was happy with it. Let me go through. Yeah, so exactly what Dan said. If you have a super clean cut, you're not shoving the tatami around. It is just slicing right through. So if it flies a long way, your edge alignment is probably off a little bit. You aren't timed during this, but you're also not supposed to sit there and hype yourself up and take a long time or anything like that. You want to flow through it. You obviously have time in between each cut to indicate what cut you are, and you can walk up, but don't sit there and stand there and like hype yourself up, that kind of thing. And they're more forgiving of this kind of stuff in open than they are in advanced. Yeah, Dan's answering for me. Thank you, Dan. So back to the mountain here. So this was me being a little too conservative, trying to conserve too much mat. My targeting wasn't great, and a mountain of that size would normally be about a small deduction, which is about 2 points. And they listed it again as a scallop. It is absolutely a mountain. That's just what they were using. And you can see that they were kind of looking at it, and I thought, yeah, it was a mountain. So that was 18 points. Next is the other ascending. And this is why I think they might have put in cut 2 and cut 4 opposite, because they list me as 20 points here. That's not a 20-point cut. I definitely had a scallop there. You can see it didn't go straight cut. Let's watch that again. And I'll go slow here. You can see right there, I started turning the sword up more vertical rather than that 45-degree angle. This is something I've been struggling with for a while. It's a problem I know I have, and I know how to fix it. I just have to actually do it. So I think they actually probably reversed my cut 2 and cut 4 when putting it into the scorecard, because they list that as 20 points. That's not a 20-point cut. Pretty sure that's what happened. So next up is middle house. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know I struggle with middle house. I've been trying to get them for about 2 years now. And pretty recently, I had a big breakthrough. My friend Kevin, who has done a lot of coaching for me, mostly virtually, but also in person when we're at events, we were talking about middle house, and he said something, you middle house are driven a huge amount by the core, the body, and that rotation of the body to get them through. And every time he talks about like the mechanics of it, he was saying engage your core. Well, this one time he said pivot, and for some reason that popped a light bulb over my head. And I was like, oh, I should be pivoting on my back foot to engage the core, to help engage the core. And since then, my middle house have started working considerably better. So thank you, Kevin. And let's take a look at how I do. That was, they gave me a scallop on that. I got a 2-point deduction, so that was 18 points. And you can't really see it here, but it was a bit of an angle on the cut, but very slight. So I was super happy about that. And so here, when you're doing this feat, you have one chance to have the mat straightened, or if you knock it off, you can have it put on the stand one time. I have one cut left. That mat is a little bit cockeyed. So I was like, why not use my one cut straightening on what I consider my worst cut, which is middle house from the right. So I did that and waited. That is Kevin, by the way. Just a little straightening, just to give myself that tiny bit of advantage. And that was a full 20 points on that cut. I was super pleased with it. It was definitely straighter. You might notice on the middle house, the tatami flew further than 4 feet from the stand. From everything I've seen, middle house almost never have a short drop. So they're obviously more forgiving on the how far the piece flies. Let me go look at some chat because I see a bunch of stuff. Yeah, so when I'm looking at the scorecard, I am not really reading what the deduction is because it's not necessarily accurate. It's done on the fly. I just know small deductions are generally, I mean, obviously I don't want any deductions, but overall, small deductions are good. Andy, I want to stare down 20 minutes before my cut. I think they would be like, move along, Andy. I was cutting a large amount of varying plastic bottles the other day, and some of my cuts were also scalped, but hey, hell, still happy being mostly. The fact that you cut and are able to do all this stuff with swords while being functionally blind is amazing to me. It is awesome. And if you can get multiple cuts on a milk job, kudos to you, because that cannot be easy. Yeah, that's exactly what Dan was saying, is that these might not be in exact order. They might be ordered in Oberhau, Unter, Middle. I'm not sure. They were not entered in. Oh, hi, Philip. Thanks for joining. This is the primary judge for the cutting tournament. He's the one scoring the effectiveness of the cut. Russell was the one scoring the form. Yeah, so I can't look exactly at the cuts. I'm pretty sure I know which cuts had which deductions. I'm fine with it. It's all good. Thank you, Philip, again for running the tournament. I always appreciate it. So overall, my score for that round, 6 cuts, 20 points per each cut, is possible. I got 112. I was in first place after round 1, and that I was stoked. I was so hoping I'd finally make finals. I didn't make finals, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So that was first round. That was, frankly, I think I did really well. I was super happy with the middle house, especially. We're going to look at the next one, and we're going to use this angle because this is semaphore. So you can see this little screen here. Hopefully you can see. Yeah, this screen here. There's Philip, there's Russell. This screen's going to indicate what the cut is going to be. So it's going to flash a red triangle in the area the cut starts. So if you see it up here, that means Oberhau from the right. If I see it down here, it's Unterhau from the left. You have to, I don't think you have to, but I like to start out of measure. When the cut's indicated, step in, cut, and then step back out. You need to get the cut in while the cut indicator is on screen. If you don't, it's a failed cut. Because I actually timed this, you get 3 seconds per cut and 3 seconds in between. each cut. And there's a total of 8. Each of the 4 basics, Oberhaus from each side, Unterhaus from each side, twice. So a total of 8 points. You can get 160 points in this round if you're perfect. 8 cuts on one tatami mat can be kind of difficult, especially as you start getting lower, or when you're high, if you get a little greedy, it can really impact your score. So let's take a look at how I did. This is something I have practiced quite a bit. All right. So Oberhau from the left. That was, I would say, pretty much perfect. I don't know if there was any deductions. I guess I should pull up the scoring. But again, these might not be in perfect order. Oberhau from the right. Another nice, clean, easy cut. Unterhau from the right. All right. So this is where my problem started. I had a big scallop there. I cut about halfway through and then turned vertical. And like I said, this is something I've been struggling with my Unterhaus a lot. I know exactly how to do it. I can fix it. I can cut perfectly straight Unterhaus, but every time, right now, I have the muscle memory of with a scallop in it. So I have to go up there talking to myself, thinking in my head, straight lines, straight lines. When I do that, I'll almost always get a nice straight cut. I didn't do that here, so I was going a little fast and I scalloped big time. So now I got in my head, straight lines, straight lines. So another Oberhau, fine cut. So I despiked the tatami here with a failed cut. And on semaphores, you do not get a respike because the video keeps playing. So that's the end of the round there. What happened? I was thinking straight lines, and I had a straight line there. The cut was straight, but I was dragging the tip. I didn't accelerate the tip enough. So my hands were leading the cut, and I didn't have the momentum or the energy, whatever you want to call it. I couldn't get through the tatami mat because I didn't have correct form. And that ended my semaphore rounds after only 4 cuts. That was heartbreaking for me. I've done semaphores a bunch. I've practiced it a bunch. It's my favorite of the feats because it's dynamic, it's interactive. You don't know what's coming. And I blew it. I simply blew it. So that was heartbreaking. I still had hope, though, that I could make finals if I had a really good round 3. I knew I would make round 3. They were shrinking the size of the competitor pool after each round. It started at 33, I think, then went down to 16 for round 2, and then 8 for round 3, if I remember right. I was pretty confident I would make round 3 because my score in round 1 was really good. Yeah. By the Sword, thank you for joining me. All right, so that was round 2. Disappointing round 2. Round 3 is thrust to cuts. So what you're doing here is you are thrusting into the tatami. The idea is to thrust in the middle third of the mat and make sure the tip gets all the way through the tatami. It doesn't need to go deeply past the tatami. In fact, sometimes that's a problem. It just needs to make it all the way through. And then you hold the thrust there until the judge indicates that they're ready for you. Then you extract the sword in one smooth motion and proceed into a cut. It can be whatever cut you want. I did all Oberhaus because that's the easiest cut for me to make. You can do this a total of 6 times. So this round is worth 10 points for the thrust, 10 points for the cut, if I remember right. Total of 120 points possible for the round. If you thrust in the outer thirds of the tatami, it's a deduction. If you miss the tatami entirely, you can still go into the cut and get some points for the cut. So I like to start in what something resembling fluke, because then I can thrust forward pretty easily. And I usually include a passing step as well, where I'm stepping with my back foot forward. So this is something that I have noticed I do a lot and other competitors don't, and that's tip the tatami stand. And it causes problems because as I'm extracting the sword, the tatami starts, the stand's rotating, the tatami's flopping around, and it's destabilizing the tatami. I think I am putting basically too much force as I'm stepping forward into it, and I need to focus more on uh, just enough force to get the thrust through without knocking the stand back like that. So one interesting thing is because the judges are over here, they can't always see if the tip got all the way through. So they are having Kevin, the person who's spiking the tatami, also judge whether or not it went through. So good cut. It was a good thrust. I think it was through the middle third. I guess I could pull up the score again. Yep, I got a small deduction of some part. So there you can really see the problem with knocking the stand back. Look at the tatami. It's hardly spiked anymore at all there. So I am already destabilizing the spiking, and you really don't want that for any cut or thrust. I got a lot of comments. I will go look at those comments after we finish this round. But I made it through, and you can see just how destabilized the tatami is there. This is a pretty much almost a nightmare situation because getting a cut like this, it's not easy. I got it. I got a pretty clean cut. I took off a huge amount of tatami there, but I got it and it's relatively straight, but it's barely on the tatami. And the only rubber band left is the one at the very bottom. And that's a problem because now the tatami is going to start unraveling a lot easier. And that's I had asked for my restraightening, respiking, that kind of thing, because it was in such a bad state there. So I think I failed this throw. Oh, no, I got it. Not sure how good that cut was. It's getting a little awkward. I got some deductions for being, I think, off balance. It's hard to say. And here's the nightmare situation. So I just knocked the tatamis off the peg entirely. But I recovered. And yes, this is, if the judges allow it, it's allowed, and I can keep going here. I didn't get all the way through, but I got the cut and I kept the mat on the spike, so I was able to keep trying. But look at that tatami. There's like, I can't imagine how to get a thrust into this. So you can see me like, what do I do here? What do I do? What do I do? So let's try. And I failed. I gotta say, it was a failure, but it was fun. When I went up to, that is Ox, I think. When I went up there to try to thrust through the tatami, I got quite a cheer from people. And when I failed it, there was quite a groan. It was a fun round, considering I managed to respike the tatami and do that funky thrust. I didn't do as well as I should have done, though. I have done much better at thrust to cut. I am much better at it. And I think I'm just putting too much force into it. So I'm going to start playing around, practicing with maybe just doing a lunge, maybe not even stepping at all, and really just using arms. I need to practice it and see what will work for me so I can stop destabilizing the mat like that, because that was definitely a problem. And that was the end of my participation. I did not make it to the finals. They took the top 4 from the cumulative score of rounds 1 to 3, and I did not make it there. I got, let's see, round standings. I was in, I don't see the actual score. Yeah, I was not good enough. I let myself down, frankly. I am able to cut better than that. I should have cut better than that. And it was just a little bit of an off day for me. All right, let's see. I aim for the blurry plaster thing on top of the slightly blurry things. Yeah, talking about how you're cutting while almost functionally blind. That I suppose if I wanted to cut with my glasses off, I would be at least have some idea what you're talking about. My eyesight isn't that bad, but I certainly wouldn't want to do that. Yes, again, Philip, and if anybody else happens to be in here who had anything to do with running Combat Con, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Your first Albion arrived today. Use your alerts and grab the mercenary when it came up. Congrats, man. The mercenary is a phenomenal sword. I love mine. And thank you for using my alerts and being a member. Targeting was my biggest struggle on semaphores for the longest time. Yes, I can absolutely get that. Semaphores it's only the 4 basic cuts of Oberhaus and Unterhaus. The point of it is to have you moving in and out, not knowing what cuts coming, how much mat you can conserve, and just kind of getting in your head, basically, and seeing if you can stay calm and collected and react to it. Targeting is absolutely something that can be a big problem. If you take off a big chunk, you're not going to get a good score. Yes, congrats. Had a couple fail cuts due to targeting. I got to practice getting more cuts on mats. Yeah, as much fun as cutting with water bottles is, and it can absolutely be helpful for learning the mechanics and reading cuts, and it can absolutely help you grow your cutting ability, including on tatami. There's no real substitute for actual tatami. You can do pool noodles, but they don't have any resistance to them. If you flub a cut on them, they're just going to kind of flop around. Whereas tatami could fly, it could bend your sword. There's a variety of things. So while you can certainly do a lot of stuff without tatami, there's nothing quite beats cutting tatami to learn how to do it. Well, I mean, 2 mercenaries, that's a choice you could make, definitely. I don't know that I would want 2 of the exact same, but I know where you're coming from, and we'll talk about that later. Yeah, so I don't have footage of it, but Dan has a strategy for his thrust to cuts where he starts like with the sword very, very close to the tatami and just does very short motion, gets all the way through. I think there's some dislike for not having a full, an extension of the sword. I don't know the full details there. How is it still on there? I was wondering the same damn thing. Calling pass fail on the thrust is my favorite part of being a spiker. I'm glad that you like doing it or that you do it. I do not want to spike, especially at a competition. I suck at spiking. Almost every single time I spike at home, I end up with bad spikes. I don't want to do it at a competition and be responsible for a competitor having a bad round because of my shitty spiking. So I try to avoid doing it as much as possible. Do they have different categories for different swords? So that depends on the event. At Combat Con, it was just open cutting. You could use whatever longsword or arming sword you wanted. It had to be a longsword or arming sword. There was one competitor who wanted to use his Lancelot sword, Red Baron, and Philip said, no, that's not a longsword. That doesn't qualify for the tournament. But you can use either a longsword or an arming sword, and you can switch in between feats. most cutting events that I have been to have the event broken down by the type of sword. So like SoCal Sword Fight has long sword cutting and arming sword cutting. Valley of the Sun has that. I'll be at Fright Fight coming up in a few months. That one is open cutting as well, so it doesn't have a restriction on longsword or arming sword. I finished 7th out of 33 in open cutting. Well done. Thank you, Philip. I am mostly happy with my performance. I am stoked with my performance from round 1, especially the middle house. I finally think I have those, maybe not locked in, but I have a good enough technique now that I can pretty reliably get them. And that's huge for me. There was a time there that I didn't think I was ever going to get them. So, but I let myself down in the later rounds. I really should have made finals. The vast majority of training is on 16-ounce bottles. Yes. I do a lot of water bottle cutting, obviously, and you can learn a lot from them. They don't have the resistance of tatami like Dan is saying here, but they absolutely can be read. You can see how clean the cut was by looking at the water bottle. Targeting is also a good point. Baltimore Knife and Sword, how are you doing? Yes, Valiant Armory was there. I will talk about the vendors in a little bit, but yes, they were there. Yeah, well, I got it to work with Matt if he wants to collab and wasn't sure. I wasn't like, not sure everything you're saying there, but something about your mercenary and maybe having, I'm guessing, Matthew Cross do something with it. So I love Albion's greens. When they put a green grip on, I think it looks great. So I say stick with that. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So that was my cutting performance. Could have done better. In my opinion, I should have done better, but I learned a lot from it. I need to, I have things to refine on my thrust to cut, and I have to, once again, I need to continue to work on my Unterhaus to really nail in straight lines, accelerate the tip. Things I already know I can do. I just need to build that muscle memory on them. So let's move on to another one of the Levin Lance's dagger or knives. We're going to look at, I don't even know which one this one is yet. So this is a Bowie knife. This is made by Gulzar Ahmed. And this is, I reviewed a knife very similar to this that Nate sent me recently. This is kind of inspired by what Nate thinks the first Bowie knife kind of looked like and was designed like. It's quite thin, it's quite simple. You can see it has some taper in the tang, not as much as I remember. Oh, that's why. Look at the thickness of the tang there, and then the thickness of the tang there. So it tapers in this direction rather than in this direction. That's to make the knife lighter, and this knife is light. It is a beautifully quick knife. I can't swing it around in here. I'm going to destroy my monitors. But it's got a wood grip that has this crosshatch pattern on it. I wasn't a fan of that pattern when Nate showed it to me in pictures, but when I hold it, it feels really, really nice. And it's a very simple knife, but it is quite nice. It's got 3 pins, and it looks like the pins are steel with, I'm guessing, brass, maybe bronze, not sure. And then a pretty simple sheath. So this is an evolution of the design that I had reviewed several months ago. And I think this is a better overall design. Good job, Nate, on refining that. And while we're at it, let's look at the other one, because there's 2 of these. And this is the one I like more. I'll talk about why. So pretty similar. You can see it also has the thick spine, tapers on the blade side. What I like about this one, the tang sticks out from the grip, which is always a problem on the knives with scales, in my opinion, with natural material scales. But it's been rounded over incredibly nicely. So I can feel the tang, but there's absolutely no hot spot there. It feels great. I love that little detail there. It is a great detail. It feels amazing in the hand. I think this is The other one is really nice too. This is the peach of the bunch, in my opinion. Yes, Stan used the Valiant Armory Talaro for most of the feats. The first feat in advanced cutting was semaphores on a double mat, so a mat that was double thickness. And for that, he used Dan, you used your Alexandria for that, if I remember right. Struggled with that. I ordered a Tauber from VA, but I looked at the Talaro. Yeah, both of those are phenomenal swords. You can't go wrong with either. Yeah, it's a hard choice. Yep. I have a Bowie knife that he had Gulzar Ahmed made, and it is quite sharp and cuts very well. The one I reviewed a few months ago was a laser. It was amazingly quick and good at cutting. Tim brought a sword that I will not. It was a Falcata. I don't remember the maker. Was it Vince Evans? Tim, if you're still here, chime in if it was Vince Evans. Utterly gorgeous. You have some really amazing swords in your collection. Dan is absolutely a Talaro advocate. I don't think the Tauber has what I would consider a reinforced point. I can't think, in my experience, I've not seen any A-trims or swords that are, or vision swords that are based on A-trims that have a reinforced point. But I could be wrong. I'm not the end-all be-all on that. It is a nice polish, yes. It's quite shiny, but very even. Does not have it. Yeah. Edwin Forrest Bowie. I have a reproduction of it. I agree it's probably close to the knife used at the sandbar fight. Philip, I get the feeling you and Nate would get along because Nate loves Bowies. Yeah, if you have something from Perna Darnall, I am sure you're happy with it. He was outstanding. It's such a shame. Yes. Yeah, that's something that Nate was talking to me about, that the first Bowie, as far as he could tell, did not have a clip point. It was almost, it could be mistaken for a chef's knife, and those absolutely look like they could be mistaken for chef's knives. And with how light they are, and I think they would actually work very well as chef's knives. Yes, Dan used an Alexandria, and the guard hit him in the head. And I'm not going to lie, I haven't done that with an Alexandria. I don't think I've done it with a Principe, but I have certainly done that before with other swords. It is a hazard of cutting, especially if you're not super familiar with the sword. Vince Evans, I was right. Yes, that Falcata was gorgeous. I saw Kane Chen review of the Durnall blade, and I'm so sad about it. Yes. Yeah, keep an eye out. Some people do sell Perna Darnall pieces. In fact, one went up on the Sword Buyer's Guide forum pretty recently. I don't think it's sold yet. It was a saber, if I remember right. Check it out if you are a member of that forum. If you want a piece from Perna Darnall, that one looked really, really nice. All right. So, like I said, we're going to talk about vendors next. The other big reason I go to these tournaments. So let's look at what Sterling Armory brought to the event. This is possibly the first Combat Con I went to that I did not buy something from Sterling Armory. And that's not because they didn't have good stuff. It's just because the one I wanted, we'll get to that in a second. Let me pull up. I'm just pulling up their website here because it's the easiest way to do it. Their website, if you're not aware, is now actually working and has some stuff going on it. So the one I wanted was this one. This was the star of the Sterling Armory booth by Chris. That's a bronze pommel. Light. It felt so good. I picked it up and I was like, I'm buying one. I'm going to buy this one. I connected with it very quickly. And then I asked Chris how much it was, and he said, well, there's one person who is waiting for permission from his wife to buy it. And then I have two other people in front of you who want to buy it. And I got there early. So other people agreed with me that this was the sword at Sterling Armory's booth. This one, I believe Philip bought. Not my cup of tea. I love the hilt. One thing that's interesting is this black here. That is a dye. That is a riser on the grip that is just dyed black rather than some other material. It's got a coin that Chris brought back from Scotland. I think it was where he was, on both sides. This one was a bit more authoritative in the hand. Didn't really fit me entirely well, but like I said, I believe Philip picked it up, and I don't blame him. It's a beautiful sword. He had this Irish ring hilt long sword, another really nice one. I don't particularly enjoy Irish ring pommels. I find they don't quite feel, they affect the balance in a way that it doesn't really connect with me. But it's a gorgeous sword. There's a lot of detail on this crossguard. I really appreciated it. It just wasn't for me. Those ones are all the sold ones. He also had this arming sword that was like a dice show almost of longsword and arming sword. Again, not quite for me. This one that's kind of like kind of similar to the Albion Kingmaker, a bit blade forward for my taste, but felt really good even with that. This one, I loved this one. I was tempted by it. It was not sharp at the event. Chris had to rush out to get his stuff there, and he didn't have this one sharpened yet. But man, I love the hilt on this. It's that classic Alexandria hilt, and it looked really, really good. One of the reasons I didn't buy this is I was talking about this at the con with some people, is as I've cut more, I start gravitating a little bit more to swords that I would use for cutting. And this being a 15A, oops, not that one yet, pretty narrow blade, pretty thick blade, wouldn't really be a particularly great cutter. Felt great in the hand, moved well, just not quite what I wanted. This last one is a very interesting one. And I was pondering it for a while. So this cross guard, my first glance, I looked at that and said, no, I don't like that cross guard. It looks weird. It doesn't look like something I would see on a medieval sword. But the more I looked at it, the more it grew on me. I especially liked that it had double fullers. It's not something I've seen Chris really do much at all. It has the rain guard. It also felt really, really nice in the hand. This one is what Chris described as a functional version of a very ornate sword that is in the Cologne Cathedral, if I remember right. And it is in this book, The Sword, Form, and Thought. You find it here. So that is his version of this sword here. So just look at how ornate that is. This is kind of tricky to show, but you can see some similarities, definitely some differences also, but that sword was very, very nice, and I debated with myself for a while if I was going to buy it. I eventually decided not to. I don't really regret it, but I do regret it a little bit. If you want a sword, it felt almost as good as that other one I mentioned earlier, the one with the bronze pommel. If you want a good all-purpose longsword that feels really nice, and you want Sterling Armory, check this one out, and I would highly recommend it. It does feel very, very good. So that's what Chris brought. I don't think he brought anything else. Colton had some choice stuff. This one went almost immediately. He came the second day of Combat Con. He wasn't there the first day. And this one felt amazing, looks great. It sold within a few hours of him getting there. I was heavily considering it, but I already have one longsword from Colton that has a ring hilt, and I'm not a huge fan of the little bulbs here. Those are the main things that kept me from wanting to buy it. I loved the full wire wrap, felt great. This was an outstanding sword, and I don't remember who bought it, but he's going to love it. And then he had a couple Witcher swords. So we had a silver sword that was great. It was very narrow. It was thick. It was a spike and light also. It was 2 pounds, 14 ounces, which for a longsword is quite light. It was very nice. Again, for me, I was hoping to find a cutting sword. This wasn't really it. And then also another Witcher sword that also was very, very nice. And this would be a good cutting sword. This would be like a Witcher steel sword. The hilt aesthetic didn't quite hit me the way I wanted it to hit me, though. So, when I'm spending, I think these were around $1,800 to $2,000, somewhere around there. If I'm spending that much, everything has to hit me just right. And these didn't quite do that. I'm going to stop and look at some chat again. Are there any Deltins you want to add to the collection? I'm not particularly familiar with the Deltin category or catalog. So I won't say that I'm looking for any in particular. I wouldn't mind owning a Deltin. I think it would be a great addition to the collection, but it's not something I'm going to go out of my way to find. If something comes up on the secondhand market that really strikes me, I will look into it. If Sterling Armory ever does more of those 20A blades, I'll get one. I have to mug one who beats me to it. You may have to fight Kane Shen because I know he's interested in a 20A from Chris as well. Although I think he wants one with a longer central fuller. Chris's 20As are outstanding. Beautiful sword. The black on the gray. Oh, it is stainless steel. Color me corrected. It didn't feel like that to me, but I didn't look at it too closely because I could tell it wasn't for me. What website? This is sterlingarmory.com. I'll put a link in the description or in the comments at some point. That Irish ring was a lot of. Yes, it was. That was a beefy sword. I don't blame you for that. Yes. Jonathan Ying bought your fate. Yes, I know. I was jealous, believe me. I was hoping his wife would say no, and then the 2 people after him would say no so I could get it. That was an awesome sword. It was the choice of the table, in my opinion. Chris and Purse. I'm not sure what Purse is, but at some point, because we live in the same state, and he's super nice. Yeah, check out his website. I think they have something on there about events they're going to soon, because I think there was a Renaissance fair that they were going to pretty shortly after Combat Con. That with Jonathan's. Yeah. Yeah, just keep rub it in that I didn't get that. Love the double ring guard. Yeah, no kidding. Thanks for joining us. I hear a lot about Chris's work for cutting. How does Colton's hold up? So Chris will sometimes, Chris is really the only cutter of Sterling Armory. Warbear Josh will sometimes cut if he can be persuaded to. He's taken some lessons from Phil, and he is an outstanding cutter, frankly. He took gold at Valley of the Sun Open Cutting at one point, if I remember right. If not gold, then silver, something like that. He's an excellent cutter. He just almost never does it. Chris will sometimes take one of Colton's swords and cut with it in competition just to advertise Colton's work. So they are good cutters. I would say he doesn't put as good of an edge as Chris does, but Chris puts a better edge than almost any other maker I'm aware of. So that's not really saying much. Colton swords will absolutely cut very well. and that is absolutely true. Chris's work is uh, populating cutting tournaments a lot more now. Colton has a less output. He also does a bit more of a fantasy twinge to a lot of his swords. Like a lot of them recently have been with Witcher swords. So there's a question about whether or not they would be allowed in a competition. Warbear took silver. Okay, that was his first, no, second competition. He competed at Fright Fight before that, if I remember it. He is an excellent cutter. He's got he should be doing a lot more. Calder, that's who bought it. Yes, I totally believe it. That sword had good geometry for cutting. Felt great. Yeah, absolutely a good cutter. Colton puts a good enough edge on. It's not competition level sharp in my opinion, but it's good. Yeah, Colton also does a good number of falchions, which nobody does a falchion tournament. Colton's work has almost everybody drooling. His sense of style and aesthetic is just outstanding. I don't want to forget Warbear because he had some interesting stuff there. I don't know if they. Never mind, Warbear has been too lazy to put anything up on their website, and you can quote me on that directly to Warbear if you want. So that was Sterling Armory's booth. Highly recommend. I've said this every time I talk about Sterling Armory. If you like what you see, try to get a hold of one because they move so well. They are excellent swords, right up there with Albion, right up there with Valiant Armory, Angus Trim. Their own sense of feel and style, but all worth it, definitely. Albion's booth, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. We had Valiant Armory's booth, and the main thing I wanted to talk about with Valiant Armory's booth is I think I have it up. I thought I had it up. Ah, there it is. This sword. So this is their Castillon falchion. This is the first time I've had a chance to see and handle this sword. This thing is light as a feather in all the best ways. Pick it up and it just feels like an absolute extension of the hand. Absolutely choice falchion. And I was sorely tempted to buy it. I know Zach was saying he thought for sure I was going to buy it. The problem was it was just slightly out of what the budget of what I wanted to spend. I could have afforded it. I just didn't want to. I don't like to go into debt for swords. I don't, and this wouldn't really be going into debt. I have money I could pull from other sword funds to pay for it, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to buy something, stay strictly within my budget. It's another reason I didn't buy that Cologne Cathedral sword from Chris. It was above my budget as well. I don't think this sold at the event, and it's. I assume it's because. Let's see if they have it in here. Yes, it is still available. So if you want a really nice falchion, buy this one. Falchions don't sell very well, from what I understand from multiple makers I've talked to. I don't get why, other than they're not tournament legal, maybe, but falchions are amazing fun, and everybody should own at least one good falchion. So this one is a really good choice, and it is available and ready to ship. So consider getting it. Yeah, I bid on that sword as well. I mostly was bidding on them. All the auction swords, I mostly bid on them just to make sure they got a good price for them. I was fine if I didn't win, which I didn't. Dan is one of the biggest proponents of Valiant Armory, and yeah, his club, SoCal Swords, they got 7 Valiants from that show. Always a good reason to make poor financial choices. I agree, Andy. I agree. You will love that. Yeah. I believe it, and it just moves so well, so quick. That is a choice sword there, and it should sell very quickly. Oh, cool. That would be fun to do. It would be interesting to see some of this stuff being made. I don't live near anybody who, well, I kind of live near Casey Lund, I guess. I think. I don't know. It would be very cool. I have too many swords. I want to have money saved for a Sterling Armory, a VA Tauber, a Taro. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. There's a lot of swords that I would love to buy. I've had a, I've told Mike at Albion every time at Combat Con that if I won a jackpot on a slot machine, I was going to walk up to the Albion booth, just slap my hand down and say, I'll take them all. It would help if I played slots, though. I never play slots, so that would never happen. Shout out for the VA Practical Longsword. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about. They had 5 of those, if I remember right, and they all sold. This is their new sword, and it's going to be hard to find, I think. Bear with me for a moment. There we go. So this is a new model for them. The sword is 750. So it's got a little bit less refinement. They don't remove the scale from the fuller. A little bit lower polish on the fittings, simpler fittings. If you get a scabbard with it, it's a less expensive scabbard with pretty much no details or no decoration on it. It's a kind of like their mid-range. It's kind of on the high end of mid-range at 750. From what I can see, it's based not on any specific Gus Trim 16A, but kind of like their interpretation of their version of a 16A based on Gus Trim swords. And it's a good sword. It's not for me because I've yet to really handle a Gus Trim 16A that I actually enjoy handling or really enjoy handling, but it's an outstanding club sword. This was what I would consider the perfect sword for a club to buy as their cutting sword for a bunch of people to use. So that's a great choice. Well, you're just trying to speedrun buying all the expensive stuff, aren't you? Yeah. All right. So the other big vendor there was Albion. I don't really have any photos of their booth, but I did post a short of it. They brought some really cool stuff. They brought the Sponte Nielsen, which they brought to the last 4 or 5 events because it's over a $4,000 sword. Can't be an easy sell. But they also brought the Ljubljana and a Clooney, 2 more museum line pieces, and I want those swords. I was debating for a while on the Clooney also, which is even more outside my price range. And my wife was not helping because she was saying I should buy that one. But yeah, they brought that stuff. They brought, let's see, a Viceroy. They brought a Dane. That's something I haven't seen them bring. I remember. That is a lot of sword. That is too much sword for me. I love the look of it. It is such an imposing and big sword, but it's just a bit too much for me. We brought a Tyrolean and a Maximilian, Soldat, Vigil. They brought a whole bunch of stuff and had a pretty brisk business. Not all of them sold. They never sell everything, but they sold a good amount. And I did buy some. So let's talk about New Sword Day, shall we? I've got a number of swords here, and we're going to skip that for a second, go back to the Levin Lance's daggers. So we have another one by Brian Curse here. Very, very similar hilt design. Let's look at the scabbard first, though. Look at that beautiful grain. I don't remember the type of wood on this. God, that grain is gorgeous. The polish on it is beautiful. This scabbard is stunning. The wood of this grip is really nice also. If Nate is here, he could tell us what the material is. I don't remember off the top of my head. And then the blade is like, I would say heat blued, except that's not blue, that's orange. It's got a really cool look to it. I think this is the best of the Brian Curse daggers, just because of how cool it looks. And it is a little bit loose here, but it has some retention. I really like this one quite a bit. Style, there was a specific type of knife that Nate was looking to duplicate. I don't remember. I'm not a knife person really, so I don't remember the exact design that he was trying to duplicate. But this one is even lighter. There's less wood back here, so yeah. And then the scabbard's a pretty simple green leather over wood core. If I remember right, this one has the best retention. Yeah, fits in very nicely. So these all three knives were by Brian Curse. I don't remember what Nate said he paid for them, but I'm going to say, hazard a guess, it was 100, 150 at most for each. If you haven't checked out Brian Curse's work, look him up on Facebook. He is one of the most versatile swordsmiths out there right now. Makes a huge variety of stuff. I just posted a video of me cutting with a Type 13A Great Sword of War that he made. And that thing has some design behind it. It's got a lot of thought behind it. And I'm going to be reviewing that in 4 weeks. So you'll get something about that more pretty shortly. My wife was encouraging me to buy a sword. Oh, the problem is my wife is an enabler when it comes to this. She will encourage me to spend money I don't have, and I do not like to do that. But yes, this is certainly a good problem to have. So the triangular plunge grind, it doesn't bother me, bother some people. It's kind of a calling card of Chris's work in particular. The way he puts it, pretty much all swords have that section on them, but most hide it in or put it behind the guard in the tang area. And he likes to choose to bring it out as kind of a calling card of his. And it also does add a little bit of weight right there where the blade's a little bit thicker, which helps with the balance. Doesn't bother me, but I can understand why it might bother some people. I got to have a laugh pointing out the Ljubljana for RJ, the world's biggest wheel pommel hater. The Ljubljana's wheel pommel is like probably around that big and probably around that thick or so. It is a beast of a wheel pommel. And when I pick up the Ljubljana, pick it up, and the first thing I feel is that's a heavy hilt. You can feel it. All right, Fairburn likes commando knife from World War II. I was thinking Fairburn to myself, but again, I am not a knife guy at all. I'm a sword guy, not knives. So I didn't want to say it and then be wrong. Thank you, Phil. All right, so let's go back to New Sword Day. I got a number of things here. Not all of them are from Combat Con, but the first one is the Albion Electus. I have not owned a good Gladius before. I have a budget Gladius that was sent to me as a review sample quite recently. And when I saw this at the table, this is a mains Gladius. So is the one that the review sample I'm going to be reviewing in 2 months, somewhere around there. I was like, probably be a good idea to have an idea of what a good Gladius is, so I can compare it and see what I think of the more budget version. And this one I really like. I like the blade. They had this one, and they had, I'm terrible at remembering their Gladius names, but they had one that wasn't a Pompeii Gladius. It was the other one that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. But I like this blade more. I liked the hilt on that one more because it was the flatter style pommel and everything. But I really think this is a very cool sword that is. There's been a hole. It's been a hole in my collection. I haven't had a really good gladius before, so that's why I chose to buy this wicked stabber of a sword that, as far as I can tell, should be able to cut quite nicely as well. Moving on from that, I also bought the Albion Squire line bastard sword. I have owned one of these before, and I sold it after, or actually I traded it after I got the Albion Mercenary. But I like the sword. I love the Mercenary, and I was like, you know what? I wouldn't mind. I did a video several years ago when I had both the Squire Line Bastard and the Mercenary. I did a video comparing the two of them, but it was more of an aesthetic overview of the differences. And I wanted to kind of I decided, let's do a more of a deeper dive video about the differences between the Squire Line and the Mercenary and see if I can tell the difference, how they feel, that kind of thing. I can say this fits into the Mercenary scabbard I have perfectly. Actually, it fits better than the Mercenary does. So that's kind of interesting. This I'm not positive I'm going to keep. I do have the Mercenary, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy it, do that video on it, maybe do a full review. Not sure. But, you know, Albion has their buy 6, get 1 free, and that's not quite the right terminology. If you buy 6 swords in a year, you get the average cost of those swords as credit towards a new one. And I had proxy bought 2 swords for people at SoCal Sword Fight and 2 swords at Combat Con. So I needed, if I wanted to get to that 6, I needed to buy 2 more swords. So I was like, I'm going to buy a couple, get 1 free, and then maybe review them, maybe sell them. It's kind of up in the air. Altogether, it was within my budget. That was one of the reasons I did this. Yeah, Dan has some PTSD about gladius and cutting. I love Roman history, but still, yeah, a gladius is not really my area of focus. I'm much more into long swords, followed by arming swords and falchions, but it feels like with how many swords I have, I should own a good gladius. Yep. Especially if you have a couple of them already on order. Not a bad idea. It's a hell of a deal. So the other one I got from Albion is the Squire Line Viking. This is also something that is pretty much missing from my collection. Really, the only Viking style sword I have, it doesn't really count, is the Windlass Landjade, because it's kind of I would consider it transitional between Viking and medieval, honestly, but it could be considered Viking. But this is definitely Viking era, and it's cool. Viking swords have such a presence about them. They have such a intimidation factor, in my opinion, and this one says that beautifully. Now, Albion also had the Thane there, and the Thane is the first Viking sword I've ever picked up that I was like, this feels amazing in the hand. And I was seriously considering buying it, but it wouldn't get me to that 6th, and that was the problem. So that's why I went with the Viking, the Squire Line Viking. That one is another one I might sell after I review. I don't know. Actually, being honest, if I sell either of those, I'm probably going to get all the video done, get the review completed, sell it, and then post the review, so there's no questions about whether or not I'm trying to profit off my review, coloring the review to try to make it sell. But I don't think I'm going to sell that because, again, Viking sword is kind of missing from my collection. So that's what I brought home from Combat Con, as well as 2 swords that I proxy bought for other people. Can you recommend a mid-priced Agincourt sword? The Paul Chen version has a high-quality 5160 blade. I'm just not have a look. Do you, by Agincourt, do you mean a sword that would have been theoretically at the Battle of Agincourt? The retail, the Bastard is, hold on, let me see. The Squireline Bastard retail is $620, and the Squireline Viking is $544. Very similar to the Albion Hersier. Yes, that is the same blade as the Hersier, I believe, and basically a very similar hilt. I can't say for sure, but I believe the Hersier might be 2-piece pommel, whereas the Squireline is 1-piece, but very similar swords overall. I appreciate that. I always go out of my way to try to make sure that there's no appearance of conflict of interest. It's crazy cheap on the Albion Squireline is kind of a hidden gem in my opinion. They don't get enough attention because they are good prices for swords that are basically slightly lower finish than their next generation line, and they're roughly half the cost of an Albion. The big problem is the 2-year wait, because people don't want to wait that. Most people are not willing to wait that long for a sword, and I don't mind the wait, but I can see why it would be a problem for people. And as far as I'm aware, Cult of Athena never stocks the Squireline. I don't recall ever seeing one come up. So really, you either are in the 2-year plus wait, or you got to go to one of the events that Albion goes to, which has in the past few years been SoCal Sword Fight and Combat Con, and Combat Con's gone, and they're not going to be at SoCal Sword Fight next year. So it's going to be hard to find Albions in the wild like that. So don't you need to sharpen them? They come by default blunt, but you can pay them $35, $40, something. It's not that much to have it sharpened. Now they do have, because they're not ground from the beginning as sharps, they will tend to have a little bit more of a secondary bevel than Albion normally does, but pretty minimal. The 2 I bought from at Combat Con, most of the time when they bring Squireline swords to cons, they are sharps. They had one, I think they had they had one of each of the Squireline, if I remember right, and one of them was blunt, if I'm remembering right. But generally, if you go to a con, they have the sharp ones. All right, so 2 more swords to show. We have here Landsknecht Emporium Blunt Gunther. So I was a little surprised to receive a blunt. It was actually a shipping mistake, but Landsknecht Emporium said, keep it. We're going to send you a sharp one, and then I can do a review of both of them and talk about how the blunt feels in comparison to the sharp. And this is something I'm excited to review, because I've been wanting to check out Landsknecht stuff for a while. And it's always been like, when they show up in Cult of Athena is when I don't have money. And then when I have money, something pops up that I want more. So it's never quite been the right timing to get a Landsknecht one. And then they reached out to me and asked if I wanted to do a review of one. So that worked out very well. And then the other one is the sharp. This just came today. And this is one with the upgraded antler hilt fittings and the CC1 pommel, I think they call it. And I'll just give very, very brief first impressions. This thing's amazing. This feels great in the hand. It is sharp. It is quite possibly the sharpest sword I have received in a long time. This false edge cuts paper just as well as the true edge, which blew my mind. I never see that. This is a really pretty sword. It feels really good. I am really looking forward to getting a chance to put it through its paces. And it's going to be really cool to see how the blunt compares to it, how compare their handling. And I'm going to hold off on another observation I had because I'm going to save that for the review. And the last of the Levin Lance daggers, this massive smatchet. It's kind of, it's got some fancy flair with the double leaf to it. It's a blackened blade. This is by Gulzar Ahmed as well. It's got a glass breaker here, very robust tang that does have some taper. Feels like G10 or something like that on the hilt. Very beefy blade, but not blade heavy, surprisingly, with that big of a blade. It moves and feels quite nice. Should cut pretty well. It is quite sharp. And it has a nice wood core leather wrap scabbard. This one, I believe Nate has some plans to refine this design and actually potentially make a sword version of it. I don't know the full details of that, but it sounds interesting. Antler looks great, but if we don't smooth it, you can get hot spots. I have not felt any hot spots so far. I only received it today, though, so can't really say. But yes, Antler can. It is a different feel for how when you're gripping it. It's a very different feel than like a wood or a leather wrapped wood. I think you'd enjoy cutting. Yeah, so I can show this with the Hersier, or not the Hersier, the Squireline Viking. When I held the thing like this, basically, really gripping the pommel more than like half gripping the pommel, half gripping the grip, the thing felt like an absolute extension of the hand. It was perfect. And I think it would be a lot of fun to cut with like that. This feels right like this to me also. I would not want to hammer grip this. I could probably do more of a like that, but I really feel like choking down like that makes a big difference. I know Philip is a big advocate of gripping this type of sword like that as well. Incredibly well-designed messers for excellent prices. I agree from everything I've seen. I'm going to hold off on fully agreeing because I need to do my review process. I see a Dorothea for sale. It's just never in my budget. Yeah, there's been so many times I've been wanting to buy a Gustav for almost 2 years now, I want to say. And I swear every time Cult of Athena gets them in stock is right after I spent the money I had, or they are, when I have money, they're out of stock. And sure, I could place an order with Lance Connect. Of course I could do that. And it's something I thought about doing. It just never quite lined up. You know what I mean? All right, so I think that's most everything I wanted to talk about. Let's see. Like I said, 2 weeks I'm going to be reviewing the Todd Cutler German war sword. I posted a video of me cutting tatami at my sword friend Ryan's. That's 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks after that's going to be the Great Sword of War from Brian Curse. Again, if you haven't checked out Brian Curse's work, go check out his Facebook. He has a Cinque Dea available right now. At least it was available last I saw. And I think he was asking $800 for it, which is a pretty damn good deal. But he has a lot of versatility in what he makes and makes stuff pretty quickly too. Now, it is handmade and he doesn't put a high polish on his stuff. He kind of goes for a rougher polish, but the quality is of the craftsmanship is there, and his woodworking is outstanding. So those are the next two reviews I'm going to be doing. I'm going to hopefully get more cutting with both of those swords. Depends on the weather. Last I checked, when I started this stream, it was still 105 or plus out. So it's really hard to find time to cut when I in the July and August. After that, it starts cooling off enough in the evenings that I can get it done. Might do what I did for the Great Sword of War and just go out and cut at 8 o'clock. But the light sucks and it's still pretty hot. I think that's everything. In terms of cutting events, I've got an event coming up. Dan is running an event in September in SoCal that I'm going to be going to. That's going to be a fun event. It's a small one. And then at the end of October, there's Fright Fight in Phoenix, Arizona. I believe Sterling Armory is going to be there. Gus Trim might be able to make that. I know he's planning on retiring to that area very soon, and it sounded like he was going to try to make it. That's a great opportunity. So check out Fright Fight. It's a fun event. It's small, but not super small. And then Valley of the Sun next year, probably February, maybe January, I don't know. And then SoCal Sword Fight. Summer is now going to be missing a major event for me with no Combat Con. So I'm going to look into going to maybe a different event. Maybe Queen's Gambit. That's generally July, I think. But they weren't able to get cutting done this year because their insurance hiked the price up, like tripled the price at the last minute or something. My friend Kevin's his club is doing a small cutting event, but that's in West Virginia, if I'm remembering right. So I might try to get to another event in the middle of the year next year, but it's going to require more travel than I'm used to. So hopefully, who knows, maybe something else will spring up that takes Combat Con's place, and hopefully in a place that's not Las Vegas. Oh yeah, 90s and humid is awful. Hey Chris, you missed us talking about you, but that bronze pommeled sword that Jonathan Ying bought, I wish I could have got that one. You too, Philip, and awesome. Gus is going to be there. I'm looking forward to that. I did cutting the other day, almost close to 100 degrees. I was only up. Yeah. When it starts getting past 95, standing in the sun and doing activity is hard. And getting it on camera is hard because cameras start overheating. And then for me at least in the desert, not only does it get up to 105, 110 pretty much every day, it doesn't cool down. I woke up this morning at 6:30. It was either this morning or yesterday. I don't remember. Woke up at that, went out, looked at our thermometer for outside temperature. It said 88 degrees at 6:30 in the morning. So it just doesn't cool down. So if I'm out there, the heat's coming from above, but it's also coming from the ground, and it just makes for a miserable experience. So hopefully it starts cooling down. Got another 3 to 4 weeks at least before it starts becoming a little bit more reasonable. But I think that is pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I don't have anything else. I don't see any questions coming in, so I think we're going to call it here. Thank you once again for joining me. I really appreciate it. And look out in 2 weeks for the Todd Cutler German War Sword review. I think that's one that a lot of people are going to be very interested in. Until then, Alien 2 out.